Hello, and welcome to Preparing Your Data for Submission to the SAA Dataverse. This tutorial was created by members of SAA's Committee on Research, Data, and Assessment, or CORDA. In this video, we will be going over how to prepare your data package for submission to the Society of American Archivists Dataverse. We will be following along with the SAA Dataverse data package preparation instructions and the metadata worksheet, so you may want to have those in front of you. We will also be taking a look at the page for the original A-Census survey data in the SAA Dataverse for examples of what files and metadata are included. Before you get your data and associated documentation ready to submit, you should review the SAA Dataverse collection development policy and terms of use to make sure that your data set is appropriate for the Dataverse. Once you have confirmed that your data meets the necessary requirements, the next step is to get the file containing your data ready for submission. Your data set should be actionable, meaning that it supports analysis and interpretation. Survey results should be submitted as tabular data, such as Excel, CSV, or tab-delimited files. Summary reports may be submitted as supplements to the data set, but are not sufficient on their own. As we can see in the A-Census data, the data is saved as tabular data from 3 different statistical data packages: SAS, SPSS, and Stata. Data should not contain any personally identifiable information, such as names, telephone numbers, or dates of birth, or any other information that may directly or indirectly identify an individual. Keep in mind that it may be possible to individually identify someone using a combination of information, such as job title and place of employment, so it may be necessary to remove those fields as well. The data should be free of inconsistencies and errors, such as numbers of observations that are listed incorrectly or values that are out of range. Finally, if you are not the creator or owner of the data set, make sure that you have their permission to redistribute the data through the SAA Dataverse. Another important part of your data package is your codebook or data dictionary, which contains definitions for each variable in the data set, including variable names and labels, and value codes and labels. When preparing your codebook for submission, make sure that null or empty values are defined and that the codebook has been compared to the actual data set to confirm that they match up. Formal citations to original data sources and instructions to access the specific data set should be provided. For example, the codebook for Immunization Services Protocol Data 2020 in the data package instructions lists the variables instance ID, immunization service, and missed vaccine reason. The variable missed vaccine reason has the name, the reason the client missed their appointment for vaccination. Each of the values is coded with a different number and are labeled 1, cultural/religious reasons, 2, client forgot appointment date, 3, attitude of health workers, 4, fear of getting COVID at the health facility, 5, lack of transport, and 6, other. As you can see, they have also defined a null value, which corresponds to an empty field or unanswered question, as don't know or refused, meaning that the client either didn't know why they missed the appointment or refused to answer. Below the table, the dataset is cited with a link to access it, and it may be found in the Living Goods Dataverse. A Readme file provides additional contextual information about the dataset, including data collection methods, sampling procedures, variable construction, modifications to the data, and formal citations to related research products, such as reports or articles that use the data. The Readme file also contains instructions on how to properly use the data, including necessary hardware and software, as well as any other contextual information needed to understand and use the data. The excerpt of the Readme file for the immunization data in the data package instructions includes a description of the data, the unit of analysis, the universe, that is, who are the subjects of the data, the start and end dates of data collection, and the methods used to collect the data. If you would find it helpful, Cornell University has a guide to Readme files, as well as a template, which are both linked from the data package instructions. If you used code to analyze the dataset, the code should be included in your submission package to enable other researchers to reproduce research results that use the data. The code should include non-executable scripts that document the analysis process. Scripts used to import data should use relative file paths, meaning that the file path used to identify the location of the data file is relative to the location of the script, not an absolute location in a particular file system. This allows a script to import the data regardless of the computer it is running on. Scripts should be included to import data packages required to successfully execute the code. The code should be run on a base installation of the statistical software package being used to make sure that it will execute properly on workstations other than the one originally used to analyze the data. If you did not use code to analyze the data set, you can disregard this and you don't need to include any sort of code in your submission package. Going back over to the A-Census page in the Dataverse, you can see that they have a documentation codebook. They have this HTML file, which is a documentation and description and citation, which is kind of like the Readme file. This data set was obviously created before the Dataverse, so the titles of the files won't match up necessarily to the Dataverse instructions, but they represent the same things. They contain the same information. And then there's also this file that has related literature to the data set, which is saved in a plain text document. And then there's also this code file, A-Census, SAS, supplemental syntax, which appears to be some code that was run in the SAS statistical software package. So turning now to the metadata worksheet. In addition to the files included in your submission package, you are also required to submit metadata about your data set. While your metadata gets entered directly into the Dataverse website, Corda has provided a metadata worksheet to allow you to preview the fields and gather the necessary information before you are ready to submit. The worksheet is not required to be included in the submission package, but is meant as an optional preparation tool for submitters. The worksheet consists of 3 columns, as well as a space for you to enter your own metadata. The metadata field label is the name of the field as it appears on the submission page. The description is a brief description of the field, and the recommended format is the format that the data should take. For example, the title should have the title of the study and the year separated with a comma. Required fields are marked with a red asterisk. Some rows in the metadata worksheet correspond to a section of the metadata form rather than an individual field. These rows are marked with a plus sign next to that metadata field label. For example, author has several different fields that provide different pieces of information about the persons or corporate bodies responsible for creating the data set. Not every field will apply to every data set. For example, if your data set was not produced with grant funding, you can go ahead and ignore the grant information section. However, you should try to be as complete as possible with the metadata you enter, as it will help other researchers find and use your data set more easily. Looking again at the A-census data and going over to the metadata tab, we can see an example of this. So you can see the title, A Census, Archival Census and Education Needs Survey in the United States, comma 2004. The authors are the alternative title is A Census 1, since there was recently a second A Census 2 survey conducted. The author is the Society of American Archivists and A Census Principal Research Consultant. There isn't contact information, but it says you can use the email button above to contact the author. There's a description of the data, subject terms and keywords related to the data, related publications, notes. The language is English. It was funded with grant funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And then it has information about the deposit of the data into the Dataverse. So I hope this has provided you with an idea of what you will need to do to get your data set and supporting documentation ready for submission to the SAA Dataverse. Take a look at your data and try to see if you can find any errors in the data, anything that would make it unsuitable for sharing, any variables or data values you don't understand, and if there is any contextual information missing. You can also look at the data sets already in the SAA Dataverse for examples, keeping in mind that your data is different and may require different types of files for submission or different metadata fields that weren't used in the data sets already in the Dataverse. As you're preparing your data for submission, feel free to reach out to Corda with any questions about the submission process. Thank you.